What's up, everybody? Brandon Lilly here with the Be Legendary podcast powered by Sorinex exercise equipment. I am sitting with a man that I hold in very, very high regard. First off, just because of the adventures that I've seen him, create and tell the story of through YouTube and Instagram and whatnot. But really, in paying closer attention to him after the Joe Rogan podcast, the kind of person that he is and the way that he lives his life just is very intriguing to me. And I want to introduce everyone to Donnie Vincent. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thanks. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It's ever since we bumped into each other in Vegas, I've been looking forward and wanting to have this conversation, wanting to chat more. Yeah.
And one thing that stood out to me, and I actually commented about this on one of the previous podcasts, and I hope it doesn't sensationalize you to any degree, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. I felt very quickly when I introduced myself that, first off, you were very, very comfortable. You were, eager and, just kind of approachable, whereas some people aren't. But sure. The thing that stood out to me was that you started asking questions. And as I was talking to my boss, Bert, the thing that I guess I kind of correlated with that would be that you're someone that depends on a set of skills that keep you alive. You have so much situational awareness relative to most people in this common fast-paced world. It stood out to me as something that was very unique about you. I know a few other people that do that, but do you do it consciously, or is it just a skill set that you've developed, over the last 20, 30 years?
Certainly not consciously. I don't go about this, I'm not using a mind game or something like that to try to remember someone else's name or trying to, do a 3-part system check off where I shake somebody's hand and try to
right.
appear to be man-like when I do so. But no, I mean, are you referring more to me asking questions about you?
Yeah. Just the questions of, you're trying to.
That's just interest. That's just me. I appreciated you asking me if it was me, which always makes me chuckle a little bit because I feel like I look like everyone else. And people often tell me, no, you look completely unique like the rest of us, of course. I mean, yeah, we all have that kind of self image issues, if you will. But no, I just wanted to know about you. I mean, I'm just fascinated by people, and you look like a fascinating character. And you had, in introducing yourself, you brought up a couple of points in just general conversation, which just intrigued me to ask more questions. And have a general interest in other people.
Well, one of the things that you brought up right there is just your generalized appearance. And, I don't want to jump the cart too far in front of the horse, but, as an avid hunter, outdoorsman, biologist, conservationist, you're in the woods and in the elements quite a bit. But you seem to have taken an approach to kind of bucking the system of camouflage. That's one thing that I actually really appreciate about you. And I posted a picture. I don't know if you kept up with any of the stuff that the Sorinex family was posting, but we had a pretty big event called Winter Strong at headquarters, and 40, 50 people, just very, very high intelligence group. People that were doing all sorts of survival things. We had an archery challenge, a lift, run, shoot competition. Okay. And I was wearing a flannel jacket in shooting the archery course. And somebody commented that, I had the Donnie Vincent look going on, but it's kind of neat to see. And it almost, we live in a world where everybody wants to be seen and everybody wants to be a part of, right? And I've always felt like a kind of an outsider to some degree. Mm-hmm. And, maybe kind of the center of 4 concentric circles. Like I was a very good athlete, but I was also on the chess team. I played in the band, but I was also, I didn't fit into any one of those groups as the coolest kid in the group. So I've always felt a little, and as you get older, that's perfectly fine because you're diverse. Right. Yeah. But as someone who is I think you are a face of the hunting and outdoor conservation community. What does the industry say about you? You seem to be kind of thumbing your nose at them a little bit, but I don't think it's a negative. I think it's just a personal choice, right?
Yeah, that's all it is. And for years, I mean, when I was younger, and I tend to, I'll warn you right now, I tend to talk too much, but I'll go quickly through this. And then if you have other questions, just let me know. But when I was younger and hunted, I wore camouflage. You know, it's just you went to a Cabela's or you went to a Bass Pro Shops or a Gander Mountain or a local sporting goods store, and you just saw these jackets and pants on the shelf. And when I was a kid, you just wanted to put all of your eggs in one basket. You wanted to put your best foot forward. And so, hey man, if I want to be successful in the woods, I want to disappear. And I used to, and I don't regret this at all, and I think it held great purpose, but I used to go out hunting for squirrels by myself. And I remember my dad, he'd look at me and I'd have fleece, I'd have fingerless fleece torn gloves on, and I'd wear, you know, an old flannel shirt, and then I'd put an old camouflage, the original real tree, like tree bark camouflage jacket on, like hooded sweatshirt. And then I'd actually, when I go out squirrel hunting, I'd actually paint my face. I'd put face paint on, and then on top of that, I'd put this shrouded, ripped up old fleece face mask on, and I would go out to where I'd find habitat. It's funny that I think back to this now, but I'd go out and find habitat where I was really seeing a lot of gray squirrels in these oak flats. I would set up a chair with a 22-250, which is a little bit too much for squirrels, but I like that gun. And I'd sit there and I'd wait for squirrels to move. And then I'd sit there so camouflaged, I would just slowly raise my gun, kill a squirrel, work the bolt, and just sit there. And so camouflage when I was younger, I loved it, particularly in that scenario of hunting squirrels. And then as I got a little bit older and I started doing some of the bigger hunts on my own, I started realizing like, hey, I have to take clothing a little bit more serious, you know, because I was traveling to Alaska and, you know, the weather is as big a threat as anything. Everyone loves to talk about wolves and everyone loves to talk about bears, but really small airplanes and weather are the two most dangerous things that you're going to encounter in Alaska. And so I started having to buy very real gear. And in doing so, I started buying, you know, Patagonia, Arc'teryx, things like this. And I just basically trended away from camouflage and I started hunting in that stuff and was having great success. I've told this story a couple of times, but I hunted stone sheep in British Columbia, and I actually arrowed that stone sheep while wearing a white t-shirt and a bright purple Patagonia vest, because that's just all that I had on by the time I got into position after the sheet. So it was obviously looked way outside the box. But and then I started wearing some clothing I got approached by Sitka gear in 2009. And I brought some of their gear on. I did a photo shoot for Peterson's Hunting Magazine. And then after that year, they asked me if I wanted to be a Sitka athlete, to which I did, because much like you just said, you know, people like to belong to things, and I didn't have the money for that gear. And so the fact that they were going to send it to me and I could use it and be part of this crew and maybe see my photos in catalogs and right, you know, catch imagery of myself in social media posts, whatever it may be, that stuff was all kind of ramping up around then, was really intriguing to me. And, you know, and then this career started to kind of stumble into my lap, and I started to see more and more photos of myself, and all of this different things started to kind of come around, and people started asking for my story. But really, me trending away from camouflage right now is just the fact that that's where my heart lives. That's where I hunted. As soon as I was over with my youthfulness of thinking that I needed to look like a tree, I basically backed off of that and realized that we can accomplish anything we want with how we're doing it. It doesn't really matter what we're wearing as long as we're safe, right? I wear very technical gear right now. I wear a lot of Fjallraven. I wear Hanbog boots. I wear some very technical, you know, different rain gear and snow wear and down pants, down jackets, things like that from various companies. And so my gear is very technical. I'm definitely safe in that regard, or as safe as you can be going to the places that I'm going. But it's not really turning my nose up at the industry, but I don't feel like I don't need to wear the costume of a hunter to be a hunter. And
right.
And I think a lot of us, a lot of people do. And I get a lot of people asking me questions about, have I seen my success go down? And I haven't. A few years ago, I wore a bright fire engine red hat on an elk hunt, and it took me a long time to kill my elk, and a bunch of guys were writing me saying, man, if you ditch that red hat, I bet you'd be far more successful than wearing it. But, you know, ungulates, particularly elk, they can't see red, so they see that as dark gray. So it had nothing to do with the hat, but it's, it's little misperceptions like that. Right. And so,
Right.
yeah, it's just, I would say to anyone, if you really want to be camouflaged, and I've said this before, if you're really doing a hunt, let's say it's for turkeys without a blind, or you really want to disappear, let's say you're hunting waterfowl in the wide open and there's not enough room to have a boat or a built blind, you can't even do a layout blind and you have to really be exposed, well then you should pick up a ghillie suit, or you should build yourself a ghillie suit. And it is terribly fun to hunt in a ghillie suit because you honestly, sincerely disappear to any animal in the forest. If you get your wind right with any ungulates and you're wearing a ghillie suit, you're going to disappear. But that's basically the long and short of it. It's not really turning my nose up, but this is definitely my style. Camouflage is definitely not my style.
Well, I think it's something that, you touched on a couple things there. One being that you have this reconnection with your youth, mm-hmm. These memories. And that's something that I've really I've definitely experienced it in the last couple of years where, for 20 years, I chased this idea of being a power lifter. I chased this idea of being one of the strongest men alive. And I came very, very close to those goals, at the peak of my talent. I was ranked number one several times, and I was doing all the things that I'd set out to do, but I kind of left behind the things that really made my childhood so great, like being outside and, riding bikes and hiking mountains and doing all the outdoor stuff that I really loved to do. So after I fell, I told you I had a pretty terrible injury and 16 subsequent surgeries on my knee. Those are the very things that have kind of brought me out of whatever mess I was in. A couple of years ago, I was just deeply depressed, really had no ability to lift at the level that I was. So that left me asking a lot of questions of, well, who am I? I was just Brandon, the strong guy. And now I find myself very interested again in hunting, camping, hiking, all of these things outdoors. And I think I'm one of many. I think yourself, the Cam Haines of the world, the Adam Greentrees, the Joe Rogans have played a big part into popularizing hunting again. And it's also brought hunting and being an outdoorsman back to the conversation. And as someone who really does take the conservation side of hunting very seriously, I know that you're probably excited for the outdoor community, but do you also think that the kind of chicness of this movement can also be a negative for the hunting world? Because people who don't really respect it, they're looking more, they see guys like you packing these huge elk and these caribou and these bears. They want to emulate the photo, right? Because that's the pay dirt in the Instagram social media world, is that photo of the great animal. But a lot of people are going to get out in the woods because of this movement. And I don't think it's all good, but from your side of the tracks, what do you have to say about that? Do you think it's overwhelmingly good, or overall it's going to be a good movement, or are you a bit skeptical to see what's going to happen?
Oh, a little bit of both, right? I'm smart enough to know that I don't know the answer.
Right.
I'm smart enough to essentially say to you, I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about, but I know exactly what you're referring to. And I think it's both good and bad, right? We come from original societies of hunters and gatherers. There's, our ancestors, our anthropologists are tracing us back to 31 original societies or something along those lines that are found all over the world and on every continent, essentially. And each group that we originated from are all hunters and gatherers. And so, this is certainly lives within us. This is how we were designed to flourish before the advent of agriculture and before we started staying in one place and growing into big tribes and then establishing cities and establishing these new cultures that come with having a lot of people in a small area or having a lot of people in a large area. And so I think that while I very much enjoy the trend of people getting back out in the outdoors and people being interested in challenging their own minds and their bodies to be out there and understanding the dark and the cold and the wet and they're back to kind of figuring out a tiny bit of hardiness. It's always, I cringe when I think about who we were and how hardy we were as a people. to what we are now. If I'm walking down the street in New York City, and I'm just picking on these people, but if I'm walking down the street in New York City, or I'm walking down the street in LA, I'm seeing a version of men that come from a long standing of a group of men that look nothing alike. I mean, it's almost like holding a Bichon Frise dog up next to a gray wolf and saying like, yeah, these two are the exact same thing. It's kind of like taking a guy off the street in LA and holding him up to one of our original ancestors and saying, this guy, these two things are completely different, although come from the same delineation, and then also to regress. Yeah, I think there is a negativity to it. We sensationalize things in hunting that don't need to be sensationalized, particularly with social media. If we were able to do this movement back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, let's say hunting took a dip in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, or maybe since the turn of the century up to the 40s, and then in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the community of people started to get back outside and go and find themselves in the woods, go and get lost, and then find themselves in the same regard. I think it would have been a lot more wholesome, because the people that were really celebrating that lifestyle, the people that really had something to say or that they discovered, would have been writing books and shooting photographs and writing magazine articles and doing things. And then those of us that would seek out that information, those of us that truly had this belonging in their souls, I mean, I believe we all do, but some of us are going to have it more than others. We would go and seek those books, much like I did myself. We would seek those magazine articles. We would seek out the photographers and the hunters, the conservationists, and we would learn wisdom from these men and women. We would insert ourselves into the outdoors, and we would be true stewards of the land and of hunting and of fishing and of foraging. But with social media, a lot of these people, and I'm not above calling myself a hypocrite. Okay, I own a production company, and while my hunting films aren't nearly the sole revenue source for myself as an individual, it is a large revenue source for me. So that I've turned what is my bloodline. These are things that run in my veins and my arteries. This is the oxygen that feeds me, is being out there, and I've turned that into somewhat of a career. So I'm the first to admit that I'm being a hypocrite of the highest degree here. But I think with social media, and you have this instant gratification, and you have this, people kind of see hunting as the lowest level fruit. And I've never said this to anyone, but this is kind of how I feel. See hunting as the lowest level fruit of being quote unquote famous. And I've had a couple of friends of mine come to me and say, what about hunting makes you famous? And the answer is nothing.
Right.
And there isn't a hunter that is famous beyond, in our hunting community, everyone or most people know about Fred Bear and some of our forefathers that are, trend across all of these different populations of people. But, with Instagram and Facebook and it's people trying to get sponsored and trying to get TV shows. And they say, I receive thousands of letters from guys that say, how do I break into the industry? I love hunting and fishing. It's all I want to do. I want to have my own TV show. I've had guys that have written me and said that their lifelong dream is to win a Golden Moose Award from the Outdoor Channel. And, to me, a lot of that stuff means very little about hunting, right?
Right.
And the people that are really doing it, the people that really love it, the people that really live for it, they're just doing it. If you took away all the social media, took away all of the proponents of celebrating their work through a photograph and trying to sensationalize the things that they have done, I think the hunting population would fall drastically instantly.
Right. Well, and that's something that I can very much relate to, because when I got involved with social media, which I think I got my first, I never had a MySpace, but I got a Facebook page around 2005 or 6, somewhere in that region. And that was when I was very much making a name for myself as a competitive lifter. And nearly every single message was, how do I get stronger? How do I become a better competitor? What was the path that you took to get there? And now overwhelmingly, when I get lifting messages, the majority of them are, how do I get sponsored? You know, how do I demand more money from these? And it's like, listen, there were no sponsors. You know, I had a 2,500 pound total, which at the time was, you know, world class. It's still very good, but it was world class at the time.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
So for a squat, it was multiply gear. So there's raw lifting and multiply lifting, and single ply lifting. And you just have to kind of think of it in terms of a drag car. Imagine raw lifting as like going into a dealership, buying a car, you know, putting a new exhaust on it, maybe tuning the heads a little bit, putting a supercharger, a turbo on it, because we're allowed to use a belt, we're allowed to use knee wraps or knee sleeves, but it's basically the body lifting itself. Okay. And then on the opposite end of that is multiply lifting, which is like top fuel dragsters. If you can wear it and it can make you stronger, you're gonna lift more weight. And everything in regards to that began kind of from a safety measure. Original bench shirts, which you would wear just to kind of keep the shoulder girdle in its same tract and whatnot, you would get a 5 to 10% boost. So if you were a 500 pound bench presser, you'd probably bench 525 to 550 pounds.
Oh, really?
Now, yeah. And now the shirts, because they're triple ply polyester, they're, you know, double bonded seams. When I was benching in the mid 500 pounds raw, 550, 560, I benched 832 in a shirt. And I squatted a little over 1,000 pounds in a squat suit and deadlifted 840, but I never deadlifted in much gear at all. I just wore like a singlet. So
what's a squat suit?
Just imagine like a wrestling singlet, made out of canvas and extremely, extremely tight. So you leverage the weight against that canvas.
Okay. So you're pushing off of something, even though your body's touching nothing other than the clothing.
Exactly. Perfectly stated. Kind of like on a leg press, you can pile 1,000,000 pounds on there because your back is essentially against a wall that's not going to move, right?
Yeah.
So very, very same concept. But 2,500 pounds when I was, you know, kind of making my name in that sport, the multiply side of things. I think the world record was around 27 or 2,800 pounds at the time. And there were only one or two guys doing that level, and everybody else was in the 25s and 26s. Okay. And then eventually when I was in the 26 range, the world record was about 2850 or 60 at the time. But on the raw side, I was a 2237. I was an 843 squat, a 602 bench, and an 840 deadlift at my best. So, you know, it was, now you kind of understand why the knees gave way, but, you know, but I was a world-class lifter before I got anything given to me. And I had built my skill set so that when this market opened up and it became a thing that companies could reach out to you directly and say, hey, I'd like you to try my product. So-and-so uses it. They like it. And it just became more appealing and almost sexy for people to join the sport because of the things and the notoriety they could get rather than the true passion for the sport. And I'll take the step to even say this to you as well. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite as well. Because I love training. I loved going to the gym. I love challenging myself, but powerlifting was just the path on the interstate that was easiest for me. You know, I was good at it. I was able to lift big weights. I recovered quickly. I adapted to it very well. So I just went where I was capable. Right. And for whatever reason, people connected with me and that gained me whatever following that I have. But after my injury, you know, I had to kind of recalibrate myself and say, okay, you may get back to that point, which I did. I got back to a very high level, but I realized I wasn't going to get to the level that I had been. And I was certainly never going to be competitive for those world titles or, you know, a number one ranking again, just because every time that I would start to get to that strength level, I would get another infection and have to have another surgery. And I just kept stressing the joint, and it was basically begging me to stop. And the last surgery that I had, my surgeon was like, if you wake up without a leg, I saved your life. Like, you got to stop this madness, you know? And man,
when you say infection, are you talking about staph?
Yeah, it was staph, and there was strep a couple times as well. But the first surgery, yeah. And here's the sad part of it. So the first surgery that I had, it was in LA, and I don't know if you remember the guy. There was a USC football player that dropped a barbell on his neck a few years ago, probably 10 years ago at this point. Okay. Completely crushed his esophagus, was in critical condition, and this surgeon saved his life. He reconstructed his esophagus and saved him. Well, the same guy that did his throat surgery was working the trauma unit the day that I went into surgery. And he did such an amazing job. I was blown away with how quickly I was recovering. And then I felt I was transitioning from the carpet to tile, and I hit one of those thresholds on my walker, and I heard a little pop, and that sent me back to the doctor here in Kentucky. And he checked me out, and he was like, look, if you're just going to be a guy that sits at a desk, I'm not cutting you open again. This is minimal. But if you're a guy that's going to strap 700-800 pounds on your back again, probably need to go in there and shore this thing up, right? Well, I do. 2 days later, wake up and the infection is rampant. Well, I found out probably 10 days post the statute of limitations. Not that I'm not the kind of guy that's trying to sue to get ahead in life. I'm trying to get things coordinated so that I could, not have $72,000 in out-of-pocket medical bills.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But it ended up being E. coli, which is a surgical contamination. The first one was actually a surgical contamination, which would have given me grounds for some aid from the hospital and whatnot. But I found out too late after the statute of limitations on that kind of recourse. So was really left down this, uncertain road of like what's going to happen. And it just kept deteriorating until I had to get cadaver tendons put in. And it's a mess. But, I still need a reconstruction at some point, or not a reconstruction, but a replacement, because so far everything's been a reconstruction. But, in those moments of wondering who I was and where I was going to go, I became thankful that I had my injury, because at the time I'm 32 years old. I have a chance to figure it out. Right. Yeah. But I just worry about these people who pigeonhole themselves as a pretty face or a nice looking body or one skill set. And then when they're, when the wrinkles start to come, or, they get cellulite on their ass or whatever it is that makes them not as desirable as they were 2 weeks prior, then what? How much are they actually cultivating? I mean, you seem like a pretty well-rounded guy. Like if hunting was taken away from you tomorrow, you've still got your capability to write, to produce, to do video.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'll be honest with you, and I've said this to friends of mine and people that mentors of mine that I hold. I had this conversation with. I've been doing a traditional archery mentorship with Tom Klum Sr. and now with Joel Turner. And I had this conversation with Tom where I feel like I'm a sliver, a fine piece of hair away from being a non-hunter.
Right.
And it's funny because when I said that to him, oftentimes when I say that to somebody, they gasp and they kind of take a step back, because that almost sounds like an anti-hunting sentiment. And that's not it at all. I'm just hyper aware of the wilderness and the wild places that we are traversing and of the animals that we are hunting. And it doesn't fall on deaf ears when I realize that we have 8 billion people on the face of the earth now, and that trend's not slowing down at all. And so that's one element, one variable that enters my mind when I think about being a hunter. But on the flip side, I also have such a great love for wildlife and such a great love for animals that, it's hunting is difficult for me. It's not something I'm willing to stop. The desire to hunt overrides my desire of wanting to, trend towards perfect harmony or have these unrealistic notions of preservation. These things, these elements, they just don't exist. They exist in little pieces and little places, and it's all applicable in regards to like preservation over conservation. But it's not a struggle, if you will, but it's a constant internal reflection. And so if somebody came to me today and said, hey, we can no longer hunt, and I'll tell you why, or let's say I sat down with a board of women and gentlemen, and they said, we're some sort of super elite conservation board, and we're really looking at populations here, and we're really looking at trends in weather, and we're really looking at trends in habitat loss, and we're looking at trends in different populations and in inbreeding and immigration and immigration. They sat me down and said, we're only going to be able to hunt for another 4 years, and then we're going to have to really pull back on the stick, and we're going to have to really evaluate things, because there are just going to be too many people by then. A lot of hunters, or a lot of people that call themselves hunters that might not be hunters, they're going to want to stand up on their soapbox and say, this is my right. You can't take my right away. I'm going to hunt until the day I die. And they kind of have this, if you don't want me to hunt, or you don't think it's good that I hunt, you can kiss my ass. And I don't have that sentiment at all. I'm all ears. To me, my entire life, all of our lives are a gray area. That's how I look at everything. We are there. The variables are constant and moving. Now, do I want to stop hunting? Never. I want to die hunting. I want to hike in the mountains and fly in small airplanes until I'm 80, 90 years old. Like I'm never, ever going to stop, and I'm going to train my ass off as long as I can, still get to a gym, still run, still hike. I'm going to do these things because this is how my life flourishes. But that being said, if we had to make another decision as a people for, Mother Earth, if you will, well, I'd be on the front lines with a shovel, and I'd be on the front lines with a chainsaw, or with fundraising, if that were to be. Like I would take the same passions that I have for these wild places that I have right now, and enjoying them, and potentially enjoying them selfishly, I guess. I feel like I'm bringing in as much to this ecosystem as I'm taking out, oftentimes even more. But it is my ride, and I'm talking about the things that I enjoy. But should that go away, with good reason, I'm going to be on the forefront of trying to help the earth as much as I can, and moving the needle with helping populations and helping with habitat. And that's the problem with people, is that we condemn things that are so far away that we've never listened, we've never been there, we've never listened, we've never witnessed these issues ourselves. Like there's, just I'm going to make an issue up, although there are issues with these things. But I'm talking about people that are, here in the United States, making arguments for elephant conservation in Africa. Most of these people have never been to Africa. They have no idea what's going on with elephants, whether they're eating crops and they're destroying people's homes, or they're killing one another, or they're eating each other out of households. But you have some of these people here that are alleged elephant conservationists, and they just want to stand up and say, hey, we need to stop killing animals. We need to stop killing these zoo animals. We need to stop all deaths of elephants. It's not right. Well, in doing so, sometimes you swing that pendulum in the opposite direction and say, okay, we're going to stop shooting elephants, but now a bunch of elephants are going to start being poached, and a bunch of elephants are going to start starving to death, and a bunch of elephants are going to start being killed secretly because the farmer there is going to protect his crops and thus his family's income and safety at all costs. And so we can't ever just swing the hammer in one direction or the other. We can't say, I'm going to hunt no matter what, you can kiss my ass. And we can't say, hey, we need to stop shooting elephants. The second we stop shooting elephants, the entire world is going to trend in this Disney-like harmony, and elephants are going to live happily ever after. They're going to die of old age in a pasture, and they're going to lay down and just go to sleep as the sun sets. Neither of these things is realistic. So we have to constantly keep our minds open, and constantly keep talking and reading and listening and exploring. And as we do these things, we're going to grow ourselves. The byproduct that's going to come from this is we're going to grow as amazing people, men and women. We're going to really educate ourselves and really have these kind of fluid minds that this world seems to have less and less of these days. And when we really need it more than ever.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons. I just have to tell you that I'm so drawn to your story and to the way that you live your life, because even I appreciate people who can be in the moment doing something full force, fully believing in it, but they're also questioning why. Why am I doing this? Is this the best thing for me? Is this the best thing for what I'm doing? And I kind of heard you talk about that on Rogan's podcast, and how you're always self-evaluating and how you're open to change if there's a better way, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that and one of the things that social media, I think, has brought out is this sense of our pages or our following being somewhat immune from the ability to converse back. I see these people post all the time, well, here's my opinion, and if you don't like it, get off my page. Well, that doesn't really translate to real life, because if I'm in your face and you're spouting this, radical belief, and it somehow, affects me or impacts me, you're probably going to get my face right back in yours at some point. But it's just, we've been able to detach ourselves so much from other people, and we just keep congregating more to people who are like-minded, no matter how fundamental or how extreme we might be in our beliefs. We're not collectively arguing with people or having discussion. We're surrounding ourselves with people that are, that are cheering us on and pushing back. How do you catch these people who are caught in the crosshairs of just not knowing any better, going out here and saying, I'm getting my hunting license because, Joe Rogan says this is cool and I want to do this? How do you translate those people more towards a sustainable approach to hunting, whereas this may be a really cool thing for you to do and it may not be the thing for you at all? You know what I mean? That's my biggest fear with anything, is that people do it for the wrong reasons. They're not, are we doing this because the meat industry has pushed us to this point? I hope that's part of the reason we're pushing back. Mm-hmm. Is it because it's popular? It's sexy. It's kind of seen as this really cool way to reclaim yourself as human. Probably some of that too. And I'm okay with that end, but I just think that somewhere down the line, it becomes something that it wasn't intended to be, right? It becomes commercial.
You're right. And it does become commercial, right? You see girls, and I saw a picture yesterday of a young lady in a string bikini sitting behind a blue wildebeest, and obviously there's sex appeal there, and she's obviously thinks she's quite attractive, and she's enhanced her body, both probably in the gym and surgically, and so she posts a picture like this, and of course 700 meatheads go on there and say, oh my word, you're so beautiful, here's my phone number.
The white knights.
Please pick me out of the 1,000 curmudgeons that are writing you. Please pick me because I put, I wrote, I'm not looking at your body at all. I think your mind is beautiful, and we go that route. And then we also, you get people that are toting this idea of, it's farm to table. And and I'm, again, I have to be slightly hypocritical because I have some great passions in regards to some of these categories. I very much enjoy eating the animals that I hunt. And some people have reached out to me at times and said, so if you couldn't hunt, could you feed yourself? Of course I could. I have a job. I own a company. I make money. I can go to the store and buy a chicken or eggs, much like everyone else. In fact, I don't own any chickens. So when I go get eggs, I have a farm that's 2 miles from my house, and I march down there and I walk inside and I grab maple syrup, and those folks have bees, and I grab honey from their bees, and I grab eggs from their chickens, and his wife makes really amazing homemade ice cream, and I have a mega sweet tooth, so I grab some of that. And then sometimes if it's a screaming hot day, they sell these weird little orange Mexican sodas, and I'll buy one of those and I'll be on my way. And so, I'll kind of go down these roads and get my supplies for myself in this regard. So I don't have to eat when I'm hunting, but it's something that, when I feel the weight of an animal skin, when I'm fleshing out an animal and I'm fleshing a hide and I'm salting a hide because I'm going to take the hide home and either lay it over my couch or just give it to some elementary school kids so I can see what a caribou and what an elk and what a grizzly bear looks like. And, so I love feeling the weight of that hide. And I love, it sounds barbaric saying it, but you cut those quarters off and you lay them down and you're breaking this animal down perfectly, and you see what little bit is left. Yep. You take the back straps off and you see that it's just a perfect spinal column going to the top side of the ribs, and it's just clean. There's just a couple of shreds of meat left, specks left for ravens and for eagles. And then you follow the skeletal system. And this is all part of the this is all part of the woodsmanship. This is all part of the sensation of being a hunter. And you pop the hindquarters off, and then you take a knife up into their abdomens, and you pull out the heart and the liver and the inner loins. And basically what you leave is very little, yet still a lot for the animal kingdom to come and feast, for Mother Nature to reclaim that thing and repurpose the energy. And so these things are very, very rewarding. But then you have this digression. You'll have these people that say, oh, yeah, I'm an elk hunter. I eat organic. They try to put their little spin, their bumper sticker spin, or their T-shirt spin on all of this stuff. And they say, oh, it's farm to table. It's field to table. I was just talking to a gentleman. I don't really want to call him out, but I am going to name him because he's a dear friend of mine. And him and I will sit around in his barn, drink cups of coffee, and we share these sentiments all the time. This isn't just podcast stuff. I sit down with some of my closest friends, and we'll sit down and talk about this for hours because it's important to us, and we're reacting to the things that we see. And so this gentleman, his name is Lee Chose. He's a very famous photographer. He's a very, very talented photographer, brand image designer, and in the outdoor space. And him and I will sit down, and he was just beside himself. We had coffee a month ago or so, and he said, he saw some stuff on Field to Table. And he said, my parents, he grew up in northern Minnesota in a hunting lodge. And so his dad would hunt deer and grouse and ducks, and they'd fish walleyes and pike and, all of these things, crappies and sunnies. And he'd say, my dad would roll over in his grave if he saw that there's this movement of Field to Table, that we have to label this stuff. He's like, of course we're going to eat the animals that we hunt. And, his dad would, and he talked to me one day. This last spring, I shot a bear in British Columbia with a rifle. And he said, he texted me, and he said, man, I'm really happy I hadn't shot an animal with a rifle since 2009. I've been pretty much a full-time archer. And so I ended up shooting this bear with a rifle because the airlines misplaced my bag on accident. And so I didn't have my bow when I got to BC. And so I ended up shooting this bear with a rifle, and he sent me a message. He's like, man, it's so good to see you shooting an animal with a rifle. Not because I was using a rifle, but he said it's just so much he sees this swing towards archers that, suddenly archery has had this, has garnered this chip on their shoulder saying, oh, yeah, I do it harder. I'm better than you are because I shoot a bow. And so it's kind of like driving this wedge between riflemen and archers, when really most of us, if not all of us, have been greatly inspired by riflemen, either in stories or in our own families. And so he said, man, this is Lee saying this. He said, man, my dad is one of the greatest hunters I've ever known. And he would shoot a deer out of our cabin window if it was in the yard and he had a legal tag. He'd stick his 30-06 right out the cabin window and shoot it because he wanted to get that thing gutted, field dressed, and hanging in the barn, and started aging because it's the perfect time of year. It's the perfect scenario, and he has the perfect tag for this buck. And to him, that was hunting, and that is hunting. And his dad was just being reactive to his environment and being successful. And he'd go out and put himself in the best place for ducks, and he'd put himself in the best place to catch crappies. And when he was successful, he took the animals that he felt the environment could sustain, and he cleaned them, he processed them, and he fed them to his family. And so to Lee, and I don't know how old Lee is now, I suppose he's in his 50s maybe, but to him, he's like, the fact that we have to stamp a label on it now really irks him, because to him, this is just the way it is, and then him and I have these digressions all the time about what's edible, because hunters love to tell you, oh, hey, you can't eat a caribou when it's rotting. The flesh isn't good. Okay, so why'd you shoot it? Oh, you can't eat snow geese. People like to call them sky carp, and they say, they're not very edible, when in fact they're delicious. And they say, oh, you can't eat diver ducks. They eat invertebrates instead of corn in the fields. You want a big corn-fed mallard. That's what you want.
Right.
And, or grizzly bears or black bears or any of these other animals. And so to answer your question in a very long form, I do think that we are doing this for the wrong reasons in many, many categories, or that we're trying to justify it in a very politically correct way, when the fact of the matter is, this is your DNA, man. Like, literally, we come from societies of individuals that got up in the morning and learned wisdom from the other tribesmen into where to find food. Sure, there was suffering. Sure, there was fighting, probably to the death. Sure, I would imagine that children even were killed or passed away because resources weren't enough. And we traveled and we hunted. And this is obviously not the world we live in today, but it's certainly the world we come from, and it's certainly how we have perpetuated as a people. And so it is difficult to see the modernization of it, the mechanization of it.
Right.
When we're trying to trend backwards as fast as we can, but that's kind of living in the past as well, if you get my drift.
Yeah. I think that there's some hope. It's to touch on one part of what you were saying there. It happens in every area. So as I mentioned before, in powerlifting, you have these divisions. You have raw, which is, wearing a belt only, or belt with knee sleeve, which is kind of like just for lack of a better term, one of those like ace type bandages that you just slide up the leg. And then there's a wrap version, which is a little bit more support. And then you go into the gear sections and so on. And rather than just saying, hey, you know what, let's all celebrate strength, because that's what we're all trying to attain at a high level. It's the info. Oh, you wear gear. Oh, so you just can't hack it over here in this world. And I see that in that archery rifle divide. Because I grew up rifle hunting. I'm not ashamed of that. I remember the times and the stories and the lessons learned.
Of course you did. Everyone did.
Go ahead.
Yeah, everyone did. I mean, maybe Fred Bear didn't, but I bet he did. And maybe Chuck Adams didn't, but I bet he did. Right. And I'm not saying that these guys haven't trended towards archery for the right reasons. I trended toward it myself because I love the quiet. I sat back. Somebody asked me why I was a bow hunter. I couldn't come up with an answer. And then I started to really dive deep. That's when I'd come up with my best answers, Brandon, is when somebody asks me a difficult question, but I have no idea what the answer is. And it's often. But somebody asked me why I was an archer one time, and I couldn't come up with a good reason other than the fact that I really liked the craft of getting close. Yep. And I really enjoyed that voyeurism, if you will. I really enjoyed watching that animal go about its habitat, and I really enjoyed the quiet. I didn't really like the big bangs of guns and things like that. So, I think that's why.
Well, one of the things that I tell someone, they were talking about, what the ethics of range is. Do you kill an animal at 500 yards? Do you kill that same animal at 600 yards? At what point does it become, maybe unethical, or, and then it gets into that next question of, this is an animal that I need to fill the freezer. I have the tag. I'm legally doing it. It calls into a lot of questions, right? But I'll tell you a fundamental moment in my life that really just changed everything for me is the question of why. I went to a really unique college. It's called Berea College in Berea, Kentucky. It was founded in 1859 by a pastor. His name was John Fee. And in 1859, he proposed this idea that he was going to create a school that was 50% black, 50% white, and none of the students would pay tuition. They would only come from Appalachia, and this would fill the void of educating people with economic need in 1859. Now, you can imagine how divisive that move was, right? But the one thing that saved him from the hangsman gallows was the fact that he was a preacher. He founded the school on Christian principles, but it was not a Christian school. Sure. So it's still that model. No student that goes there will pay a tuition, and it's still highly, highly diverse. Very accepting of the lesbian, gay community, very early on. But it's a very forward-thinking place. And I was sitting in one of my freshman classes with a great professor named Dr. Phil English. And he was talking about race relations. And he said, okay, how many people in here that are white have a general hatred for anyone in this room that's black? And no hands went up, right? So he said, okay, how about black people? How many of you actually generalize and hate white people? No one's hands went up. And he said, cut the shit. He said, I've heard some of you all talking outside of this classroom, and I've heard the generalizations, and I've heard the, the jokes and so on. He's like, who here hates? And, the hands started to slowly go up. And he said, why? And he pointed right at me and he said, tell me a time in your life when anyone from any other race has made your day worse. And I couldn't do that. And I was like, okay. And he said, so do you hate other races? I said, I don't hate, but I don't understand. And he said, well, what stopped you from asking the question? What stopped you from putting your hand out there and shaking their hand like I've seen you shake these people's hands? He's like, do you believe in God? And I said, of course. I'm 19. I'm a small Christian boy here in town. And that's the way I grew up. He's like, do you believe in God because you did the work and you read, or you do it because your mommy and daddy told you to? And it was kind of like a punch in the gut. And he said, how many other books from different religions have you read? He's like, 0. I bet you've only read Christian text. I bet you've only gone to Christian churches. He was like, the best way to reinforce what you believe is to try something opposite that. Create the information on both sides of the fence and then choose an informed decision. But I don't think that we're doing that because it's too hard. As a society, we're looking at it as like, man, that's just too much work. I can see right here, if I go out and I'm, dance around in my, bikini shorts and my tank top shirt, that gets more likes than if I pour my heart out on the screen. Right. Mm-hmm. We're going to the simplest way for satisfaction. And I think right now, like you said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but archery is very much trending. So I think people who are getting into the game are maybe bypassing some of the joys of understanding and learning what rifle hunting can actually be like. And then instead of making an informed decision and progressing to archery or progressing to an atlatl or a spear or even knife killing, they're bypassing the fundamentals that most hunters took the path of, right?
Yes.
So
yes, absolutely.
How do we encourage people to step back and just say, look, there's a process to this and it takes time. You don't have to be, I don't want to, demonize anyone, but you don't have to be one of these superstar hunters overnight. It's a lifelong process if you really make it a lifestyle, right?
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And anyone that you think is a superstar hunter is probably that much further from even being a hunter. To be honest with you, anyone that's really celebrating the popularity of it. And again, I'm being slightly hypocritical, but I know what lives in my heart. I know what lives in my mind, and I know what I do when the cameras are on. I know what I do when the cameras are off, and I know what I would do should I lose my career in this space. I would not miss a beat. I would continue to do exactly what I'm doing now. I just would travel to less people, to be honest with you. But the fact of the matter is, I kind of come up with this idea. It's not original, but I've kind of come up with this idea of hunting well and good. And then the fact of it doesn't really matter your weapon of choice. And it honestly doesn't. If you are fulfilling what you embody as what hunting is, and you are hunting well and good, whether there be a camera or no camera, whether there be a game warden, watching you or not, you should make the right decisions. If shooting an elk at 1,000 yards is going to be fulfilling for you, I highly doubt it is. But if it is, and it's legal, go ahead and do it. And if that's fulfilling to you, well, then you and I are just vastly different people. If shooting an elk at 75 yards with a rifle that can shoot 1,000 yards is fulfilling to you, and you took an extra 6 hours to slip into position and you risked it all to slip into position to get closer, to enhance that experience for you, to create a fair chase scenario, however that lies in your ethics and your morals. If you build that up and you shoot an elk at a 75, 100 yards with 1,000-yard gun, and that fulfills your being, and it's legal and everything is fits your mind's eye of how you wanted this hunt to go ahead. And I can tell you that our ethics are probably slightly more aligned than the gentleman that shoots 1,000 yards. Doesn't mean he's wrong and I'm right. I'm just assimilating with the guy that would shoot the elk at 100 yards rather than shooting an elk at 1,000 yards. And so, we kind of have this dilemma of weapons and hunting styles, and some guys make fun of guys that use guides, yet some places that we hunt, it's the law requires you to have a guide. And then some people say, oh, did you kill that buck or that doe on private property? It's really funny because if you shoot a doe and you post an image of a dead doe and you say, yeah, I shot a big nanny doe tonight, got one. Everyone likes to say, I got one for the freezer. No one writes you and says, did you shoot that on public land or private land?
Right.
No one. But if you shoot a big buck or you shoot a big bull, they act as though they care about public lands.
Right.
And so they say, if you shoot a big buck or a big bull, they say, you shoot that on private land or public land, because they want to know, was it easy for you? And I get I get to diminish your return. I get to diminish your barrier of entry. Or did you hunt that on public land where it was difficult and you're thrown in amongst the wolves and you still came out successful because now I can hold you in higher regard. And, oh, by the way, I'm a huge proponent for public lands. I hate private lands, even though if some of these guys would actually open their eyes up, the private sector is doing oftentimes more for wildlife, although it is private and the gate is locked. They're doing more for habitat selfishly, doing more for habitat and reconstruction and animal populations than the public sector. But I'm just, this is what I'm saying is that we, instead of just doing things well and good, instead of hunting under our own morals and ethics and doing the things that we enjoy and celebrating the things that others enjoy, we like to kind of pick sides, and we like to dig ditches, and we like to build walls, and it's just what we like to do as a people. And it's difficult to see. It is difficult to see. And I have my own prejudice, like you said in that classroom. I have my own prejudice that I embody. I have a couple of buddies that are young, able-bodied men, and oftentimes during the season, out of laziness, they grab the crossbow and take it to the field. And I completely disagree with that. And I completely disagree with all of these states making crossbow season the same length as archery season because they're just trying to sell more tags. And now all of a sudden, this entire decree of people that were learning how to shoot a bow, whether that be a long bow, a recurve bow, or a compound bow, all of these archers that were going through the painstaking process of developing that talent, developing that shot sequence and the energy around being an archer, all of those people now get thrown in with the wolves with a bunch of guys shooting a gun that happens to shoot an arrow off the end of it. And, and then you have companies that develop these really super fancy crossbows, and they can shoot increased distances. And so now during regular old deer season, you have guys shooting crossbows that can shoot 100 yards or further. And so again, it's all hypocritical. It's all where our beliefs lie. It's all where they fall. But I do believe I do believe the bones of it, there's a wholesome idea. And I do believe there is a yin and a yang, if you will, a right and a wrong. And I think we can do things, particularly the non-hunting community, the community of people that may fall on this idea of anti-hunting or being against hunting. Certainly, I think the way we carry ourselves, the weapons we hunt with, how we carry ourselves, what we do with the animals once they are dead, once we've killed them, once we've taken them from the wilderness, the things that we do with them, whether somebody's paying attention or not against hunting or have questions about hunting. And in this community of people that don't really know much about hunting and don't really know much about the wild places, I just think our community of hunters need to be doing things on a better step, putting our best foot forward, and how we're hunting, the animals we're killing, how we're working through their death, and how we're piecing them out and getting them out of the field and using them with our families. I think all of this, how we're doing it and how we're holding it and the regard that we're holding it in is very important to those paying attention. And I don't mean we just need to put our best foot forward as a campaign. I think we need to put our best foot forward for the wildlife and for the respect of the wildlife and for the respect of the animals of whose lives we're taking. I think we need to put our best foot forward for that and hunt with the very highest of regard of ethics and morals and usage of the animals as we move forward. And I see photos every day. I try not to spend too much time on social media, but it's a concert degradation. But I see photos every day that make me absolutely cringe, and then I see trends every day that make me cringe. Like, did you kill that buck on public or private? Again, if it was a picture of a doe, nobody even asked that question.
Right.
Or if you go and I said this to a pilot recently. I was having dinner with a group of friends that are from Canada, and they're all big outfitters. They do big hunts up north where oftentimes I find myself filming. They hunt moose and Dall sheep and grizzly bears and caribou. And I said to the guy, a lot of those hunts are so very expensive, so out of reach of anyone that wants to go, aside from the people that make enough money to pay for the airplane tickets and the tags and the guides and outfitters to get you into these areas. And I said to the guy, I really wish we lived in a time where you could go to British Columbia and go sheep hunting, or go to the Yukon and go sheep hunting, or go to the Northwest Territories and go sheep hunting, go to Alaska, go sheep hunting, moose hunting, grizzly bear hunting, go on these, for lack of a better term, these long form safaris and get lost in the wilderness and build camp and build fires and hunt honestly and kill animals and have your meat for the camp. And I don't think meat really made it out of the field back in that day. I think you generally had so many guys with you either running horses or backpacking that basically the animals were eaten as soon as they were killed. And it's too bad that we can't do these things these days on our own merit, that the people that want to go and do them can go do them. It's too bad that we have to hire guides, that we have to hire transporters and this and that. And he took a little bit of offense to that, and he just missed my point. But he said, "Hey, look, man, this is how I feed my family. This is how I put money in the bank. This is how I buy cars and houses." I said, whoa. I'm not denouncing your business model. I'm not denouncing you doing this today, that this is right at all. All I'm saying is I think a lot of us embody this, when really we probably don't mean it as harsh as we say it. But I wish I was born in a different time, right? Sure. I wish I was born in the time and that I could throw oil on my rifle, grab my backpack, fill it up with my goods, and I flew up to or drove up to or rode horses up to Alaska and stopped in the local goods store and bought lard, bought butter and sugar and flour and then headed off to the field for 30 days and really got lost in the wilderness and basically was a mountain man, was a mountain hunter. I wish I was in that time frame, but it's probably very, very difficult to pull those things off in that time frame. And so there's probably an element of this huge barrier of entry, whether it be writing a check out of your checkbook or traveling all the way to Alaska on your own 2 feet, if you will, and on the way to your back. And so, there's a lot of dichotomy in the ideas, and there's a lot of dichotomy in what is modern, what is old, and what we should be doing and not doing. But I do believe that the bones of it, there is a portion of the bones that are well and good. And I do think there is a right and wrong.
So you touched on a term there that, I very seldom write down questions, but I wanted to make sure that I wrote down some for you because, like I said, out of respect for the way that I've observed your mind to work, and listen to other podcasts that you've done, the way that you articulate. I want to ask you a precursor question, but you mentioned mountain men. Who were your authors that you read, or were there any story like the Hardy Boys or any of that kind of stuff that you were into, when you were younger that really kind of pulled you towards this mountain man lifestyle? Because I would classify you as that. And I think Americans have a love affair with the mountain man. Sure. Up until very recently, doesn't it seem that way? I mean, yes, even Brawny, they changed the Brawny man not too long ago from the thick, rugged, bearded mountain man to this clean cut, handsome guy, almost metrosexualized, I think was the term that they called it there. But if you can answer those two questions, like what was your, as a young man, what captured your attention? Was it the wild, or did you read about it? Because I was a big Hemingway guy, big fan of his adventure, his stories, and he spoke of men in ways that I wanted to be like. And then reading Teddy Roosevelt's autobiography, he's definitely been kind of scrutinized for his choices in regards to the Native Americans. But as an outdoorsman, as someone who was, cultivated a lot of the same interests that I had as far as hunting and wilderness and travel and the struggle of it all, like you mentioned, getting on a horse and riding hundreds and hundreds of miles for weeks at a time. Where do you feel like that played into your psyche as a young man? And who would you point us towards as an author now?
Sure.
That might inspire you.
The author that inspired me most as a kid, and there are several, and I should probably get a list. I've been asked this a few times. The one that I remember the most, his name's Jack O'Connor. He's an Outdoor Life magazine editor and went on to write a number of books all about his adventures hunting all across North America and the world. And so I started out with a book of his. The title is The Big Game Animals of North America. And I read that book. I can't even tell you how many times. It still sits in my office. The bind is all broken, and it's a white canvas cover. It's a pretty large book, and I would read that thing literally until the pages are falling out. And the cool thing about that book, the thing that I loved about it, is he talked about, it's basically the perfect book for me growing up. So you turn a page, and he'd have this big full-size painting of the animal on the page, a big full-color painting. And the cool thing about the painting is more often than not all of them, but more often than not, if you look around the painting, you'll see a hunter way off in the background. Like if it's a doll sheet, which is the first one, you'll see three really handsome rams painted on this. You see these stark white rams with these golden horns and their pretty eyes. You see them sitting there, and then way up on the cliff behind them, you see two guys wearing cowboy hats with rifles just crouched behind the rocks. And it just kind of embodied that adventure to me. Like I could put myself in these guys' shoes instantly. Then I went on to read about these stories, and he would instantly go into stories that he had been into, hunts that he had been on, long form wilderness hunts, and where he celebrated really everything that was wild. He knew exactly why he hunted, and he penned it very beautifully. He didn't always articulate why to the reader, especially to me as a young man. I'm sure adults that were reading it had a better gist, but he was able to articulate the romance and the difficulty and the struggle, the danger of being in these areas. And it was just embodied everything that I wanted to do. And then at the end of that chapter, he would go into the natural history of that animal, where they live, how they flourish, how man has impacted them up to this point. And this book was probably published in the 1940s or 50s, 60s, something like that. And so he'd lay out all these things about the animals, how they grow, their age class, how they're born, how long they live, the foods that they eat, the predators that they have. And so I'd learn a fascinating amount about these animals. Then I'd go on to the next species, whether that be Rocky Mountain bighorn and then desert bighorn and then the stone sheep. And then I'd move in through all the bears, the polar bear, the grizzly bear, the brown bear, black bear. And then I just moved through all these species. And so I would read these books of his over and over and over again. He's a brilliant, brilliant writer. And then there are a number of other authors. And like I said, I have to get some of these guys lined out. I know one of them was Zane Grey, that I read a bunch about. He's a beautiful, beautiful writer. And I read his words, and it just blows my mind that somebody can put this collection of words together in sentences and paragraphs into this story that is just so colorful, so colorfully written. And you really can feel the heaviness of the clouds and the sullenness of the quiet water as they're driving a boat across a piece of the ocean. It's just, I mean, literally you can smell the salt air when he's describing these ideas of fishing
right,
or whatever it may be. And then when I got up and in and around college, I started reading Aldo Leopold, who's a fantastic forester ecologist, and I started reading, and he was a hunter. So that's when I really started to equate these things. I really started to tie these two notions together of, a hunter isn't necessarily a sportsman. A hunter can also be a conservationist ecologist. And in fact, one does mean the other more often than not. And it doesn't mean every ecologist or ornithologist or ichthyologist, herpetologist, doesn't mean that all these guys are hunters. But very often the opposite is true. Very often hunters are essentially mild versions of these scientists and really love the outdoors and really love the ecology and wanting to learn as much as they can about habitats and about animals and their biology. And so we become little mini experts with our observations, not necessarily through hardcore science of running variable-based research projects where we have an X and an O, but we really experiences and the things that we absolutely see and take in. We learn a great deal from these animals, how they behave right in front of us. And so reading these guys gave me a deep sense of adventure to want to go and hunt grizzly bears and Alaska Yukon moose and the Dall sheep and Rocky Mountain elk, all of these things. And through their storytelling and through wanting to live in the Wild West or in the great north of Alaska and camping and climbing mountains and the danger of it all, I didn't even realize, it's funny because when I was reading this stuff as a kid, I wasn't thinking about being a fireman or a police officer or thinking about a career. I just started thinking about that I want to go on these hunts. I wanted to go and live in the mountains. I want to go and pitch a tent and deal with the heavy rains and the heavy bugs and deal with the cliffs and the floods and crossing rivers and making sure your gun was on and making sure you were a steward of the shot and how to break the animal down and preserve the meat. Like these just seemed like a way to live, not necessarily a way to make a living, but just a way to live. This is how I wanted to live. This is the road I wanted to go down. And then, when I started reading Aldo Leopold and started reading about his fantastic mind, I mean, how that man writes, I don't even know how brilliant he must have been. It's astonishing. It's intimidating, but you read his words and he really had perspective on everything in the wilds, right? If I'm hunting the Cottontail Rabbit, I might know a fair bit about the Cottontail Rabbit, where he comes out in the morning, what he does and goes about his day. I'll have an idea that he's a crepuscular animal, meaning he really comes out in the early mornings and stays out and comes out in the late evenings again, is really gone during the middle of the day and out a little bit at night. Like these are ideas that I would learn about the Cottontail Rabbit. But what Aldo Leopold embodied was he knew the relationship between the Cottontail Rabbit and the river birch or the yellow birch and how the rabbit would, utilize the trees and how to utilize the young pines and how they utilize all these different, he started to tie this ecosystem together and how everything was related and started to talk to each other and really became an expert. He was an expert on how these ecosystems would flourish and talk to one another and exist and through evolution. And that was just fantastic, just absolutely fantastic. And you see the storytelling and it just lived in me. Like, again, this wasn't a career choice of mine. I wanted to be a wildlife biologist because I wanted to help. I wanted to move the needle. I wanted to help with habitat. I wanted to hold my head high in preserving the moose, not necessarily killing one. I wanted to preserve the grizzly bear. I wanted to preserve the monarch butterfly or the garter snake. And it wasn't until I saw that hunting and conservation were like-minded activities that I really started to love hunting. I always loved the idea of adventure, always loved the idea of being a hunter. But once I realized we were also helping, once I realized we were also giving back, there's no going back for me, and there never will be. I'll never stop.
Well, one thing I want to say to you, as someone, and I use the term fan, as an appreciative word. I appreciate what you do and what you're about, and the way that you storytell. Very much as you were describing those feelings, there is something very, very heavy about the word. And some of my favorite authors kind of play on this in that they don't paint you a perfect picture, but they paint enough of a picture that your mind kind of fills in the gaps. And I think when we start drawing with our own mind's eye, that's when we get those really like the pulse races, the goosebumps come, because now it's our story. We're creating the story through our own thinking. But in your storytelling and the way that you capture things on video, I feel very much what you were describing right there. I think you do service to the cause, which, is very much, I don't want to classify it as spiritual, but, we have slang terms, and I think hunting is a very spiritual endeavor for you. You're gaining something more than just the meat and the skin.
Very much.
And
yes.
And I very much pick up on that, the way that you connect with the land, the way that you speak of the animal. I just think you're doing a home run job of really presenting hunting at a level that's more than commercial. And again, it is a production film, but it's when I really started paying attention to you, I saw the Who We Are, and it like knocked me back. It's a YouTube video entitled "Who We Are" by Donnie Vincent. And if anybody wants to check that up, I'm sure we'll link that into the bio here. But I even showed my mom and dad, and they're as disconnected from hunting as any two people I know. It was always people, kind of peripheral to them that introduced me to the hunting world and the outdoors world. But when I was showing it to them, my mom was like, who is this guy? And especially when I brought it up today that we were talking,
Sure.
I had lunch with her and my grandmother, she was like, I bet that'll be so interesting. And that's all she's literally ever seen of you is that one video, but you're really doing something special. And not to take away anything from any of the other guys out there that are hunting icons or doing stuff as well. But I just think that there's a scale to everything, right? It's almost like Sports Center watching some of these guys Instagrams, because it's like they always get the biggest kill. They always do, it's like they're hunting every weekend of the season and in different states and so on. And what I like about you is that you're a little more, you don't post as often and you kind of tell your story as you go along. So I think your common hunter can identify with you more than some of the other guys, or at least I have, just because you seem to be in the same place that I am, especially the other day you posted 410,000 miles on your Tacoma. I actually said this, I've had about, going on almost $5,000 in auto repair in the last 2 months on my truck, but I'm very much the same way. For a majority of my life, I chased what everybody said. I had a house on the golf course. I had the new vehicle, the new truck, the fast car, the dirt bike, because that's what we're told. But I was looking back in the summer about trading my truck in, and I was like, it's got going on 300,000 miles right now. And I got kind of pissed off at myself, and it's like, is this who you've become? You throw away things that got you halfway around the world. You just turn your back on it. And it's like, looks good, paint's good, no rust, got new tires on it. Like, what the hell am I thinking? And
even if it didn't look good,
right?
I mean, you do want to. I'm not saying you're going to drive around in a Pinto, but it's really, as long as you are getting from X to Y and you're, I mean, it really doesn't matter. Like we see people with a lot of money. We see people with a lot of possessions, and we instantly think that they have it easier. We instantly think that they're somehow happier than we are. And I'm not saying that there isn't a happiness that comes with economics. There is, and that's why we all work so hard, right? We want to be able to have a nice dinner in a restaurant. We want to be able to live in a house that I'm not going to necessarily say proud of, but we want to live in a house that we feel very comfortable in and we feel very safe in, and that we're proud of. And so these things do come from economics, and it is one of the reasons why we work so hard. If we didn't, we would give it all away for free. But really, these things that you own, this notion of these things that you own you, right? We've all read that notion, and it's true. If you want to live in a $10 million home, a $10 million home comes with a lot of upkeep, and then you're either doing it yourself or you're spending even more money to keep it up. And then you have, I've actually met through the years, I've met a couple billionaires, and in talking with them, I'd hear the stress on their voice talking about other companies they owned and talking about jets that they owned and properties they owned and buildings they owned and this that they owned and that they owned. And and I just recently was on a ranch in Texas that is owned by a very wealthy gentleman. And it broke my heart to see it. And of course, I'm being selfish, but he's converting the whole ranch from being basically a wildlife sanctuary, which it is right now, into a cattle ranch. And this gentleman is very, very wealthy. And so you have this notion of, okay, so why is this guy taking 25,000 acres that is essentially a wildlife preserve right now? There's hunting that happens on it, but very little hunting that happens on it. Most of the animals live and die of natural causes on this place. And he's converting it into a cattle ranch because it probably makes more fiscal sense as a cattle ranch but he also probably doesn't need the money. But a lot of these guys, men and women, that padding their bank account is all they ever know. That's the alleged security. And so I agree with you, man. Like, and obviously I just got on a little bit of a soapbox, but I'd much rather have the simplest of interactions, the simplest of experiences that fill my heart full, than drive a Ford Super Duty that's all tricked out, and I have a $1,200 a month car payment. I would much rather, spend an afternoon swimming with the woman I'm in love with than to drive a big fancy truck. I'll definitely take the swim all day long and twice on Sunday, and that, for all practical purposes, is free.
Can I ask you a question? And it fascinates me because I know you're a guy that thinks deeply, and I know this question's probably gonna be too big for this setting, but you just mentioned love, and I'm a guy that loves love. I mean, I think it's to me, it's one of the most incredible things that we can give, and it's definitely the most incredible thing we can receive. As a man who understands life and death, the quickness that it can all turn, interpersonally, and I'm not just trying to say like an interpersonal relationship, but, with your family, with your friends, how has your path in life and this hunting path and this, observation of the cycle of life, how has that improved your human connection? Do you seek more human connection? Because I know you take long spurts where you're in the wild. Mm-hmm. So when you're coming home from that, because I'm on the road a lot too, and initially when I get home, I need a day or so to kind of just retreat to myself, and I don't want to do anything. I don't want to really be around anybody, and it's not that I'm trying to be offensive or whatever. I just need to step back and kind of recalibrate back into this world and turn mm-hmm. the outside of myself, where I was existing, off. And then, I adjust very quickly. And I feel like it's given me more meaning to those relationships. How about yourself?
Same. All the time that I spend in the wild and the time that I spend cold and hungry and scared and the lies that come to you in the darkness of the night sometimes, right? We can convince ourselves a moment's anything when we can't see the hand in front of our face. These things make our engagements with the ones that we love that much more rich, right? It gives me a fantastic presence, right? Whether that be having sex or eating a piece of pizza or having a simple conversation over a cup of tea or sitting with your toes in the sand with someone that you want to spend time with, whether that be a buddy or the woman you're in love with or whomever you're in love with. It just gives me a greater presence, gives me a greater balance, and it's just appreciated maybe a little bit more. And I just trying to take this 1 minute at a time right now, because I every minute that I'm able to harness to be my minute in my way, whether I'm being selfish or giving to another, or whether that be a quiet hike or pushing weights or eating dinner or balancing a checkbook or whatever it happened to be, I'm trying to harness every minute that I can to have it be meaningful. And of course, it's, people love to have this notion of live life like you're dying. Well, we are all dying, and it's impossible to live life like you're dying. It's absolutely impossible. If we could, we'd all live like a firecracker. Our life expectancy would be about 30, because we would just burn the candle at both ends until we fizzled out or jumped off a cliff with a dirt bike because so
I've done that.
I definitely have a fantastic presence and a fantastic appreciation of time and space. And I get lost like everyone else, right? I'll have a temper tantrum just like everyone else. I lose my way just like everyone else. Sometimes I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror and I feel chubby. And I look at myself and I go, what, man alive, I should not have eaten that pizza last night or the donuts. Like all of us go through that, but it's what we do with it, and it's how we move forward that defines us as people. And it's how we carry ourselves with one another and the engagements that we have. It's just very, very important. A hunter, non-hunter, fisherman, I don't care who you are or what you do. We can all be better. That's for sure.
And we can all just continuously take stock of ourselves. You mentioned having, going back a little bit, talking about the hunting and having ethics around it. I encourage people, there's a great quote by Voltaire. He said, once a philosopher, twice a pervert. Get out there and try things. I've done things in my life, certainly, that, I don't want to say that I've regretted, but I just knew in that moment, probably not going to do this again, and I think that's the joy of life, is taking those chances and having the realization or the wherewithal to say, you know what, I did it. I'm better for it because at least I learned. It doesn't mean I have to continue on down this path. And I think that's what we need to do a better job of, is kind of forgiving ourselves for those things. Like you said, you look in the mirror, okay, adjust. This is a reference point. And I just think that as humans right now, we live in this this perception of perfect bubble where the rich are just getting richer, the beautiful are just getting more beautiful. You know what I mean? And by comparison, most of us feel very average or lackluster. And I think it's a problem if you only look outward. I think we have to start looking inward and taking that step to have those hard conversations with yourself, asking the why, asking the where do we go from here? Where have I been? Where do we go from here? I can't change where I've been, but if it shapes who I am now, and that's something that I've been very, very keyed in on, because through the course of my injury and, pretty volatile relationships, up until very recently, it's like, friends, family, everything was really off kilter. And in looking back, God, I wish I could go back to those moments and just smack myself in the face and say, shut up. Just shut up for a second and listen to your old man, because he's telling you the truth. He's telling you right. But I can't go back. But if I wake up this morning and I'm happy and I'm looking at my life and things with my parents are better than they've ever been, things with my friends and family are better than they've ever been, at least I can say I might have learned something from those lessons, because I made the apologies that were necessary. We talked about things that were necessary to talk about, but it took me getting over myself. And I sense you very much as a person that has to have ego at times, to have the confidence and the trust in yourself to do things. But I also see you as a very much of a humble person. So as a guy how old are you right now?
I'm 44.
Okay. So you're not too much further down the road than me. I'm 37, or will be in a few days. So where did you have any of this reconciliation phase at your life? I mean, did you overcome any kind of like really regretful behavior patterns? I mean, because like my 20s, I was kind of backwards. When I was a young kid, I just kind of got into boys will be boys kind of stuff. And then in the mid 20s, it was like I just lost my mind for about 6 years, But on the heel of that, it forced change. It forced questions. And I think that was one of the most valuable times in my life. When I was completely lost is where I found the path to who I am now. And not that I'm saying I'm a perfect person, but I know who I am and I like who I am, and the things that I don't like, I'm continuing to work on. Have you ever gone through any of that shift?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a house with, pretty constant drug addiction, and I'm not going to say necessarily abuse, but my parents, I have a brother and a sister who are both drug addicts, and have been basically lifelong drug addicts. And I don't talk about this too much. I talked about it a little bit with my good friend Evan Haffer at Black Rifle on a couple of podcasts that we've had, and that's the first time I really brought it up. But I never felt safe when I was a kid, and I grew up really angry, super angry, violently angry, and with zero self-confidence. And to this day, it's probably my biggest. I've lived my life with certain regrets, some of them large, some of them small, but one of my biggest shortcomings in my own mind, and one of the things that I struggle with most, is self-confidence. And to this day, it's something that I struggle with every single day. Is not trying to reflect on being good enough to do the job that I'm doing, or anything along those lines. I have no delusions of being an amazing hunter. I'm an average hunter at best. I have no delusions of being a fitness phenom. I'm the furthest thing from it. I'm as average comes across all facets of life. However, I'm fine with that. Like I'm working on trying to be a better me every single day, trying to be a better warrior, trying to be a smarter man, a more kind individual. And so I grew up, man, elementary school, high school, big time struggle. I mean, big time struggle. I spent a lot of time in detention, and not from tomfoolery, not from goofing off and being a bad kid, but just being an angry kid.
Yeah.
And it was a big time struggle. I mean, I'll guarantee you, none of my teachers in high school predicted me to be anything other than put in jail or maybe even worse. And so, yeah, it was just and I've always had this. Probably, if you told me to pick one thing as to why I've been relatively successful, that is a term that I'm shy away from, because I want to always keep striving. But if you made me pick just one, I would say that my fear of being a failure, my fear of spiraling out of control, has fueled me far more than that lack of self-confidence. And so I've wanted to surround myself with people that were smarter than I was. I wanted to surround myself with people who were more talented than I was, or people that I could learn from and grow from and develop a craft and a product together. That the fear of failure has driven me to try and do the best I can with what I have. And I mean this. It's been a struggle. It has been something. And I said it to Evan from Black Rifle, who's lived almost a movie type life in the special forces, and he's from the outside in, it appears as though he's never failed at anything, and I don't know that he has. But I'm sure if you spoke to him, he'd tell you he failed at plenty. But in speaking with him, and he asked me, he's like, he asked me in a podcast, what's your biggest bugaboo? And I said, I have no self-confidence, or very little self-confidence. And he was flabbergasted. He just said, are you kidding me? The things that you are accomplishing, the places you go with a bow in your hand, or the places you go and come out with these stories and are able to pen these ideas down and move thousands of people, or get thousands of people at least to read and write you. And he's like, that is so incredible. And I appreciated that. And I very much enjoy the work that we produce. I'm really proud of it. And I think, should I die in an airplane crash this fall, I think our work will live on, which I'm really proud of. I think it will for generations to come. But yeah, man, I had a brutal upbringing. I did not like my parents, did not like my brother or sister at all. I haven't spoke to my sister in years. And I've spoke very, very sparingly to my brother since the early to mid 90s. I've spoke to him just a couple of times, and nothing beyond just general casual nature. And I have a decent enough relationship with my parents. I still hunt with my dad a little bit every year.
What's that like for you? Does that fill any holes, from your childhood, or? Because I do stuff with my dad now. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp that life isn't eternal. I've lost enough people in my life that I cared about to know that the door's going to close one day. And I see that in my dad, the clock is ticking, right? So it's a special thing. Even if, God, for so many years, I should have just got out of my own way and listened to my dad. He's always been a great person. I was kind of the asshole, but it's a special thing, I think, when a son and his father kind of come back together more as men rather than just, because my dad's my friend now. For so many years, he was my dad, and it was, I knew him as my dad that went to work, punched his time clock, came home. Now I know things about him. I know his interests. I know the music he likes. I know the food. You know what I mean? It's a friendship now.
Yeah, and we've gone through some of that. We've definitely built up some of those relationships. And like I said, I take him hunting now, which is really cool. We shared a moment 2 falls ago, where he killed his first buck when he was 75, I believe he was 75 at the time. He killed his first buck on a hunting property that I have leased here in Wisconsin. He actually killed the oldest, biggest buck that I have on the property, one that I personally had hunted for a few years and never saw during daylight. We finally hunted this deer, and he killed him, and he made a hell of a shot. He's not a good marksman. He made a hell of a shot. He shot him perfect on a really tricky shot. It was a misty old, I think it was November 14th, and it was just a magical experience to share with him. And he's only killed a few deer in his life. He's been deer hunting a lot of his life, but a lot of his deer hunting was wrapped around the bottle, if you will. Right?
Sure.
He would go out with buddies of his, and I think that I doubt they even left the cabin. They would just probably play card games and drink and smoke cigarettes and be pretty stereotypical in that fashion. But when he started coming with me, he started hunting for real. And I took him up to the Arctic Circle several years ago on a caribou hunt, and that was fun to kind of hunt around the Arctic with my dad. And I saw him really out of his element. He was nervous. He was afraid of grizzly bears, and he was afraid of the weather, and he was afraid of getting lost. And I kind of mess with him every day. I'd poke fun of him about the weather, and, it'd be a bluebird perfect day, not a cloud in the sky. And I'd say, hey, make sure you grab your rain gear today, because hell's coming. He'd nervously kind of look around the sky. He's like, how can you tell? I'm like, oh, Dad, I've been doing this so long. Trust me, I can tell you, like, hell's coming. We're going to be in a blizzard by noon. And he'd be whipping his head around. I said, I'm just kidding you. Just grab your gear. Let's go. And, he'd say, oh, you son of a bitch, because he's way out of his element. But yeah, we definitely bridged the gap now. We never really spoke when I was a kid, to be honest with you. We never had much of a relationship at all. And so I like to take him hunting now, and I bring snacks. It's like hunting with a freaking kid. And I bring snacks for him and feed him raisins and apples and candy bars. And he sits over there. It sounds like I'm hunting with a damn goat.
Right.
And it's funny because the guy, have you ever heard of the company Redneck Blinds?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I never really hunted out any of those box blinds or anything like that. But that guy, I think his name's Danny Little, the gentleman that owns the company. But he found out about my dad. I told a story on a podcast one day. He found out about my dad, and I'll be darned. And I'm not sponsored by Redneck Blinds. I don't do anything with them. This is the first time I've ever really spoken to this, but I'll be darned if he didn't send me some blinds free of charge.
Right.
So that my dad could hunt out of them. And I know I have a presence on social media, and I know that there's a piece of it in that regard, but he didn't ask for anything in return. And I mean, absolutely nothing in return. And he sent me some blinds because I told him, he reached out to me and said, how was that hunting with your dad? I said, well, it's a struggle, to be honest with you. He doesn't stop moving. He makes more damn noise than a goat. I feed him a Snickers bar, and it sounds like he's being robbed by two little girls chewing bubble gum. I said, it's just terrible how much noise he makes. So then he just asked for my address and sent me some blinds, which I very much appreciate because it keeps him warmer, hides his, him wiggling around from all the deer, and has given us a little bit more comfort in hunting together. And obviously, like I said, he's 76. He just turned 77. And so yeah, I would say our relationship now is better than it's ever been. There's still, I'm not going to say I struggle, and I have my whole life. I struggle with forgiving people, and it's not that I'm not willing to just let bygones be bygones, and I'm not willing to let things fall by the wayside, but I struggle with, when things have gone on for years and things have gone on for a long time, I just struggle with just saying, you know what, man, like I never felt like you were there for me. So while I'm going to compartmentalize that part of my life and I'm going to push it away and we can just move forward from this day, I probably should do even a better job of not harboring that angst of things that happened in the past, just because it keeps me a prisoner as much as it does anyone else. And I'm not going to run to my brother and sister in a warming embrace, and I'm probably not even going to really reach out to them that much. There's enough stuff there in the past that I've just kind of shed that off and move forward. But
right.
Yeah, there's definitely been some difficulty in my life. I'm not patting myself on the back by any means, nor do I feel like I've quote unquote made it, but I definitely enjoy my life now. And I'm definitely going to keep striving for whatever I can do, and I'll help any of those around me take a step forward if they care to come along for the ride or show interest in.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Have you thought about filming a hunt with your dad? And maybe, this is just me kind of like having somewhat of an understanding of that situation. That could be a really cool thing, like I don't know
Oh
what
yeah,
the
and I'm sure I will. I'm sure I will. In
yeah
fact, this next year we talked about it. Just I'll be honest with you, it's as much as um, the hilarity of it. You know, I would
right
love
yeah
to get him. I would love to get him on film, looking like a damn bobblehead, crushing apples and raisins like they owe him money. For my own archives, it'd be hilarious to get him on film. And he sniffles. He sniffles about every 4 seconds, and so I'd look at him before we had the blind. I'd look at him. He'd sniffle it. I'd look at him, and he'd look at me, and he'd say, "What?" And I'd say, "You just sniffled," and he'd say, "Oh, they can't hear that." As though, as though deer discern as to the things that they can or cannot hear. Like, yes,
right
they can hear that for quite a way. It's really funny.
yeah.
But,
That's hilarious. But I think that'd be awesome. I think, I'm just excited to see what you do because you have a mastery of doing it in a way that is honest and authentic and real, but it also tells a story. And I think for myself and your average American, we love a story and we love something we can get our teeth sunk into and we can connect with. And I think that could be really powerful. I'm just really thankful for the time you took today. I know I told you about an hour, but you've graciously given me much longer. I want to touch on a couple quick questions. And then we'll wrap up here, and then I'm going to invite you to something too, down the line whenever you're available. So number one, I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a recon sniper and he's tremendously fit, unbelievably fit human being, and very, very talented at his skill set. And he told me that he eats in a very, very funny way. Like he'll order something and it'll last him 5 meals, and it would be just like a cheeseburger. And he would just break it down into these small segments. And I was like, what are you doing? And he said, well, it's just an old habit that I have from the field days, because if I eat like a king and then I'm put on a mission where I'm given, 3 bars as a ration that needs to last me potentially 5 to 7 days, I can't go in there because my hunger is going to cause a distraction. Do you go into the wild? Because I know Remy Warren has talked about that a bit, as he doesn't eat like the day before he goes on a hunt because he feels like it heightens his senses. Are you buying into any of that, or do you have any special nutrition that you follow outside of just natural meat?
I don't have a program that I follow. Like I'm not like Remy where I wouldn't eat before I go in the field the day before. But I would definitely think about nutrition before I go in. Like if I'm going in on a big mountain hunt, if I'm flying in, the float plane touches down on the lake, I'm not going to crush pizza and a bunch of garbage food the day before and really empty my tanks before I go on to something like this. But every day I eat, and I hate even bringing this up because it sounds like a fad diet, and I don't. This is just how I live my life now, and I love it. But this idea of intermittent fasting, which is very, very popular these days, but I do it essentially every day. I don't eat my first meal so I'll get up in the morning, I'll have black coffee on my way to the gym, or I'll have green tea and then black coffee mid-morning. I'll drink water, and I get my body moving right out of the gate, little things, whether that be walking my dogs or doing some jumping jacks or a quick couple of sprints if it's the summer, sprinting down my mailbox, sprinting back to the house, whatever, little things. But I'll eat my first meal about 1 o'clock, and it's basically it's almost always a giant salad, some level of protein, whether that be one of my neighbor's chickens or deer meat, sheep meat, moose meat, whatever. And then usually a big bowl of organic broccoli or cauliflower or something along those lines of a vegetable that are going to give me. I need to eat a lot of carbs in the form of veggies, in the form of salad. I need to do that because otherwise I don't eat enough protein or complex carbs to make myself feel full. So I will feel starving and I'll end up falling off the wagon and eating a wheelbarrow full of gummy bears at night if I don't do this. And so I'll eat then at 1 o'clock, and then I eat another meal at 5 or 6 o'clock, basically the exact same meal or something very similar. I mix it up, but something relatively similar. And then I won't eat again until 1 o'clock the next day. And then usually one time a week, generally not twice a week, but it does sometimes happen twice a week, is I'll do a 24-hour fast. I'll eat a really big dinner, chicken, sweet potatoes, broccoli, something along those lines. And then I won't eat again until the next day's dinner. And so I do things like this, and it does help me get past some of these notions of being really hungry. And then I've been on several hunts where I've run out of food and didn't kill. Like I went on hunts where I packed pretty lean, expecting to kill a caribou or a moose, and then ended up not killing. And so I've ended up running out of food or got stuck there from a blizzard and didn't have food for 3, 4, 5 days. And it's amazing what you can do without food. Like your body just starts to adjust. There's times during the day you feel very, very hungry. It's definitely things that you think about it, but for the most part, you feel pretty strong, and you can get past this idea of being hangry, right? That everyone talks about. So I do practice a little bit of fasting here and there, and I think it's really good for me. And I don't do keto diet, but I do eat a lot of fat, a lot of animal products. I eat a lot of canned salmon, a lot of venison,
nice
things like that. And I do have a mega sweet tooth. I am not a purity by any means. Like if I want to crush a dozen donuts one morning, I'll crush a dozen donuts and then I'll get back on the wagon. Or if I want to eat a bag of Skittles or something like that, I'll do it and then I'll get right back on the wagon.
Yeah, man, I think that's the best way to go. And I think, over time, I don't think your goal is to have like 6-pack abs, or your goal is to be ultimately strong. Your goal is to be able to be an effective hunter, filmmaker, and storyteller. So that bodes well for what you're doing, and you learn on the fly, right? You learn things can work. You learn you can eat that pizza and then wake up tomorrow feeling probably a little more full, and then you work hard and it kind of burns off. So I think it's a very honest answer and something that so many people need to hear, because I think as much as nutrition is important, the basis of what you were saying was I eat pretty well. But you allow yourself to be free. And I think that's something that, man, for 20 years, can you believe my adherence to this nutrition stuff is just mind blowing to me? Because like right now I'm on an 80% rule. 4 of my meals per day are going to be spot on. Most of the time that 5th meal is probably still going to be really good. Like tonight I've got, some white chicken chili going on the Traeger grill right now smoking. So that's not a bad 5th meal for my 20%, but man, life is not meant to be dull and bland. I can tell you that because I've done it for 20 years and I was not a happy dude. So
I'm going on an ice fishing fundraiser this weekend, and Friday night is pizza night, and I'll eat perfectly this week. I'll train my ass off this week. I'll eat perfectly or nearly perfectly this week, because I'm going to crush pizza like it owes me money on Friday night.
Yes.
I can promise you that.
I love that. That's such a great line too. A guy that I follow and have gotten to know a little bit. He's a great musician named Tyler Childers, but he says he's beating these strings like they're owing him money. It always cracks me up when he says that. But man, and it's okay. So we talked about nutrition. You're just a normal guy getting it done. How's your training look leading up to a big hunt? Are you just so active on your day to day that you just stay in shape for it, or do you do any special preparation before you go out in the wild?
Yep, just day to day keeps me there. I don't do anything special. I train weights a couple of days a week, and then I'll mix in like yoga and core power yoga, and I'll mix in some HIIT training, high intensity interval training, and then I have 3 dogs, and I live on around my house is relatively wild, so I can take my dogs on a 2 to 3 mile trek, and I do that once or twice a day. Very often twice a day when I'm home and have the time. And so like right now tonight I'll strap on snowshoes because we have a pile of snow here, so I'll strap on my MSR Ascent snowshoes, and I'll just start cruising with my dogs, and I'll take them all the way through 1.5 miles of this prairie grass. Then I'll drop down a pretty steep ravine down onto the St. Croix River, which is the river that I live on. And then I'll walk up the ice. I'll walk upstream on top of the ice, maybe 1/2 mile or so to this little lake. And I cross back into the woods, and I have a really steep ravine that goes up to the back of my house. And so I'll do that with them once or twice a day. And so I do that. And then just general fitness of moving and, being in my office if I'm writing all day, doing burpees or push-ups or little things, and then shooting my bow. But I just basically stay this way all the time. And certainly when I'm on a mountain hunt, that's going to be 10, 14, 15, 21 days. Like I'll definitely be more aerobically fit towards the end than at the beginning. But I've also been doing a lot of HIIT training this year.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm really anxious to see how what that difference is going to be with my body and in how it's engaging in the woods and the mountains when I get there. So we'll see if I'm going in a little bit more ready this year.
I think you
which I'm
should,
excited
man.
about.
Just coming from a person who coaches and gets it, that seems to bode very well. Cause I mean, for a guy like you, that's really getting after it, out there, that high intensity, that short burst of high intensity work, is going to very much mimic a lot of your work in the field. So I think it's going to be a great carryover for you, man. I'm excited to follow along and see what you think about that. Cause I'm interested in that because, I've seen, Cam Hanes, he posts a lot of his workout stuff, and it's just unbelievable amounts of endurance, and really he's the outlier. I'm not looking at anybody saying do exactly what Cam Hanes does, because that would crush 99 out of 100 people. He's just a special person.
Yeah.
He's just a special person in that. So
yeah,
I'm still trying to put my finger on a guy like yourself, who's just living life, doing the best he can, does a little preparatory work, maybe throws in some high intensity stuff. I'm looking for something that I can refer other hunters to say, do that. Because, Cam's making an awesome name for himself. He's brought a lot of spotlight to the hunting and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
I think he really has gotten a lot of people off the couch and doing something. So I tip my hat to him. But, man, that guy is relentless in his schedule, but it's his schedule and it works for him. That schedule of lifting weights for an hour a day, running a marathon every day, or at least a half marathon, and shooting your bow 100 arrows a day. I'm going to see people following that rhetoric or that way of thinking, and it's going to crush them and it's going to shy them away from the sport. So I think there's a very fine line, like do as I say, not as I do. And I think Cam is one of those outliers that is doing the right things, is getting people talking, getting people moving. But I'm more interested in guys like yourself that I think can be replicated over and over and over. Because and not to say that what you do isn't phenomenal in your own right. I mean, I think it's a very realistic approach to talk about things in the way that you're doing them. But
I mean, I'm as average as it comes. I work very hard for the fitness that I have, and I have no problems with that. I enjoy that. But the one thing I would caution people around, and I'm not saying this in relationship to Cam, this is Cam's mantra too, but what I caution people around is they need to put fitness first. They need to put fitness in their diet first, because we are honestly what we eat. And if you feed yourself, I know a bunch of guys, and I think it's embarrassing as hell when they tell me this, but I know a bunch of guys that, they're in their 30s or 40s, and they say, oh man, I gave up on that. I gave up on that, and I'm just riding the train now. I eat cheeseburgers and chicken wings. I'm drinking beer. I'm a man. No, you're the furthest thing from a man. You are a garbage pail. So is your mental state, so is your ability to get an erection, and so is your ability to do anything in life, like defend your family from an adversary, or you have to feed and be a warrior, and you should do this. So I do encourage people. I don't care if you want to watch 8 hours of TV a night, but go to the gym first, or pick something and push yourself. I don't care if you have to plug in an Insanity DVD and do it in your living room, or you need to buy some sort of aerobics or go to yoga, whatever it is. Do that before you sit on the couch for 8 hours, because at least you'll be the best couch potato you can. So I do urge people, to put their fitness first. And I just read something the other day that said the biggest thing, the highest percentage of things that people change in their lives at the age of 40 is the majority of people stop exercising after the age of 40.
Yep.
And I am not going to stop, not ever. I will be in the gym or wherever it is that I am. If I'm in the mountains living as a hermit by then, I will still be running trails. I will still be pushing heavy logs. I will still be climbing hills. I'll be doing whatever it is that I need to do when I'm 60, 70, 80, 90. If I'm still alive then, I'm going to keep pushing, because I've seen plenty of guys in their 70s and 80s, plenty, that basically appear to me like they're in their upper 50s and 60s. Like, these guys are brass tacks. They're taking no prisoners. And I mean, I know guys that are 80 that would take some of my buddies that are 40 and swap them around the room like a little bitch.
Right. Oh,
And
yeah. And
that's what
I
I want to
mean,
be when I'm 80.
no, that's exactly. And that's it for me as well, because, 5 years ago, if you were sitting here talking to me, we would have very, very little in common. One, because I had my head stuck up my ass. I was very much, I was one track focused on being the strongest, biggest person I could possibly be. I was 345 pounds, and
Good Lord,
I
man.
wasn't. It's kind of like my friend who is also a doctor. He was saying to me, "You look great for the fact that you're 345 pounds." I mean,
Yeah,
I kind
right,
of had
right,
I
right.
kind of had the turtle shell of, you could see that there were ab muscles there, but my belly was distended. But I wasn't like
Yeah,
carrying around a ton of fat. But he
yeah.
goes, "Here's the kicker, man. You're 345 pounds. Like, your heart is kicking ass right now, trying to just keep you moving and alive." And I didn't realize how bad it was for me. And listen, to any guy that's out there that's 350 pounds right now lifting big weights, I say more power to you. But as we talked about very early on in this podcast, be willing to know when it's over. Don't be one of these people that takes years off your life for something that doesn't really think much of you. Because once you're out of it, it's just the way of things. Like,
Mhm.
5 years ago, I was one of the most searched powerlifters in the world. And today I'm probably not even on the radar,
Mhm.
so it all ends. And I think we have to have that preparation, but man, I just want to live as hard, like as good as I possibly can for as long as I possibly can. And I'm just like you, I want to be 80 years old kicking ass. Like,
Yeah,
that's,
absolutely.
that's the highlight of living, man, is to be good at it and have somewhat level of competence in this thing we call life. Um,
Absolutely.
so you've blown me away, and I knew you would, but this has just been a really great thing for me. Um, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, because I really, really do respect what you're about, and I hope that we did you some service here. Lastly,
Oh man, I appreciate you inviting me on. You have no idea. I very much I don't take any of this for granted, not a minute of
yeah,
it.
oh, I get it, and it's always a nice thing when somebody recognizes you or somebody pays attention to what you're doing. And yeah, I think you're fighting a good fight, man, and I'm a huge supporter of what you're about. And because of that, I don't know if you've seen, but I'll send you a couple links to check out. But over the weekend, we had Sorinex Winter Strong, which was an outdoor event. We all camped at the Sorinex farm. We just acquired a farm there, and we killed some hogs. We had a person
Okay.
come in who was, teaching people how to process an animal, the right way to do it, things to look out for. We had Laura Zare there, who was she's a survivalist. She was teaching everybody on the bow drill with 100% success, mind you, to tell you the kind of teacher that she is. 100% success on the bow drill with getting people to catch fire. And
What?
I'm serious, man. I'll actually send it to you right now. Bert, the owner of Sorinex, he actually just posted a whole slew of people, but it was 100%.
Dude, that is not easy.
No, it's one of the hardest things, and it's a metaphor for life, right? Because once you start getting the smoke going, what is your immediate thought? Okay, I've done it. But it's when the
No.
smoke gets going, that's when the job really starts. You really got to
Yeah,
start working
smoke's
that
the easiest
coal.
part. Yeah.
So, there was that, and then we had some guys from Leupold Optics there teaching us, proper, like, military specific information on how to set up your weapon, how to set up your scope, and how to articulate on a target. We have 1,000-yard range out there. We've got a 28 target archery course on a mile track.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and we're trying to get people like you, people who are in this world, to help us, really grow the vision of that. I
Mhm.
would love to have you come down and check out the facilities of what Sorinex is, see the inner workings of our exercise line we outfit tons of guys in the NFL, the NBA, throughout all of the collegiate teams. I mean, we're very, very expansive in that regard. And now we're getting into Bert's passion, which his dad's passion was building the exercise equipment. And Bert is a second generation. He's an outdoorsman, and he's leaning on guys like yourself to come and see what we're doing and take your suggestions on how we can make it better and how we can make it educational. I
Yeah,
think,
man, I would love to come down. I would love to come down. And on top of that, you know what I would suggest you do, because I just came from one. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. But it would be really cool if you guys held an archery immersion clinic down there with Joel Turner, who is just an unbelievable dude to teach target panic.
I was watching your stories throughout that.
Yeah,
listen,
it is life changing.
So here's the thing: it's blue sky opportunity. Like I said, we're involved with Loophole Optics. We've got it's not every day that people have 1,000-yard range. We've got two of those 360-degree pistol ranges that you can shoot down under the sand berms. I mean, it's a place that someone with your input and impact could really do a lot of good if you're interested in it. But that's something we can talk about off of this. But the invitation is public. It's out there. I'll get you there if you have any interest at all. I know we'd love to have you. You could camp there with us, or we could put you up at HQ. We got an amazing recovery room too. So whatever you need from us on the Sorinex end, we're behind you 100%. And we really appreciate what you do as a whole. So Donnie, I just want to thank you. We're at 2 hours right now, 2 hours on the nose. So we're going to wrap this up. And, Donnie, in my mind, he is the classification of what legendary is. So as always out there, if you're listening to this, be legendary, stay strong, love yourself and love somebody. Donnie, tell us where we can find you. Tell us what you're working on, and we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, you can find our films. We have 3 of them out right now: The Rivers Divide, Terra Nova, and The Other Side is our latest one. You can buy them at DonnieVincent.com. And then you can find me at Donnie_Vincent on Instagram, and just search my name on Facebook if you should want to track us down and see what we're about, I guess. And we're going for our own personal ride here, and we just post stuff and take people along. And if you should have interest, we'd love to have you.
Well, listen, man, I hope this is not the last conversation, and I can't wait to see it at Sorinex headquarters, man. I think it'll blow your hair back, but I think we could do a lot of good just talking about some stuff there. So with that,
awesome,
it's a Be Legendary podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Donnie, thank you, man.
Thanks, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.